Welcome back to Dave Smith Unleashed, and of course, thanks to all the subscribers, and thanks to everybody for subscribing and giving us a like and giving us a comment on the YouTube page, and trying to grow them by leaps and bounds with all the new subscribers we have. So we really appreciate that, and lots of big plans. We're going to start doing video, we'll start doing live shows at restaurants and things and appearances. So we're excited about it, but even more excited about. He's agreed to do a part 3 with us. My former partner on the Ben and Dave show back in the day, the great Ben Maller. Ben, thanks for hanging in with us.
It's great, and hey, listen, Dave, I have not promoted my show. I know you have the sports god, the aura of the sports god,
true.
Legend of Dave Smith. But for those that have lost track of me, I am on overnights at Fox Sports Radio during the week, and then I've got my own podcast, which I'm going to get you on my podcast, Dave, at some point here.
I'm ready.
5th Hour podcast. I'll have you on there. We'll shoot the breeze and whatnot, so we'll get that done. But it's great, man. I love these old stories, man. I have so many that we have barely scratched the surface. What is this, the third podcast? We have barely scratched the surface on some of the nonsense stories that happened on the Ben and Dave show. And that show was only on for a couple of years, but it's lived on in infamy.
Every day I get people talking about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'll have people, hey, are you the guy that was on the Ben and Dave show back in the day? Are you the Ben from that show? Whatever. I used to listen to that show, and so it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat, the impact that show had, and continues to this day, where people still romanticize that period of time.
Well, you brought up the great Rick Dees, and you're right, absolutely. What a great guy. I remember we'd be starting the show sometimes, and he'd be walking past us going to his studio. We'd say, hey, come on in, and he'd grab the mic and say, hey, it's time for the Ben and Dave show. This is Rick Dees. Everybody hang in there and listen. He'd do the open for us. It's unbelievable. And you know, one of the nicest things anybody's ever done for me, Ben, one year, Tom Holfoth in the Daily News, he voted me LA's #1 best sports talk show host, and he did the story on me front page of the Daily News, and it was a great thing. And I barely knew Dees. I just saw him, walking back and forth. We'd say hi every once in a while. I came to work the next day. I walk into the studio. There was a gift basket taller than me, around 7 feet tall, with wine and champagne and fruit and chocolates, and there was a big card on it and said, "Way to go, Dave, from your buddy Rick Dees." I said, wow, what a class guy.
Oh, that's great. No, I have nothing bad to say about these. And I've been lucky. I've had a chance to meet some real legends in my career in radio, and Rick Dees, by far the coolest. I'll give you a funny story. This actually involves the Ben and Dave show. You remember when the Dodgers traded Piazza to the Marlins, and then he ended up with the Mets?
We were there that night, about midnight.
Yeah, we were doing this stuff, but I remember when the Dodgers played the Mets in New York, I was back there. My brother lives in New York, and so I did the show from WFAN. I was in New York, you were in LA, and I went into WFAN. They were at the Queens Astoria Studios in Queens, obviously, and that's where they did the Cosby Show and all that. They had the Sesame Street. I think they did the show out of there. But anyway. I did one show from WFAN back to LA, the Ben and Dave show. And I was in New York because of I was there because I want to see my brother, but Piazza was back to play the Dodgers with the Mets. And I remember when I walked into WFAN, they said, listen, because it was back to LA and it was on late, and Don Imus was the morning guy at WFAN. And they're like, listen, you can't, if you see Imus, don't make eye contact. They're like, you got to be out of the building before Imus is here, because he doesn't want people in the building. He had all these rules about Don. You can't be around Don Imus. Where Rick Dees could not have been more accommodating, could not have been kinder, could not have been nicer. As you said, he gave you the gift basket when you were voted the top talk show host and all that stuff. Just the complete opposite of the douchebag that Don Imus appeared. And I didn't meet Don. I'm just telling you what people told me about him back in those days. And then you look at what's happened to Howard Stern and how he's supposedly changed over the years. As far as I know, Rick Dees is still the same way. Another fun part of that time, we mentioned previously Karl Malone. How about Terry Bradshaw? Lunch with Terry.
Another great guy.
Another wonderful guy. And Terry Bradshaw, who didn't really want to talk about anything other than maybe a little football. Remember, they would force him to talk about baseball and basketball, and he wasn't really into it. And Terry didn't want to do the show by himself. Do you remember that? Terry did not want to do the show by himself. He wanted to do the show with other people, and we were on after him. So oftentimes he would we would come on with him to do crosstalk, and then we'd end up doing
a half hour,
like a half hour, 40 minutes with Terry Bradshaw. And he loved us. Just fond memories. And I remember, I think you were with me where we got to go to the NFL on Fox. I think you were there that day.
Yes.
Remember,
we got to watch the whole thing. Terry invited us down there.
Yeah, this was back when James Brown, Chris Collinsworth, Jimmy Johnson, Howie Long.
Yep.
I mean, we got the VIP treatment, and they called it the avocado room down at the Fox lot. And it was awesome. We were like on the set, NFL on Fox, and it was a wild, fun, crazy time, and fond memories of Terry Bradshaw, who's still doing it, by the way. He was old then, Dave. Terry Bradshaw was old then, and he's still going on Fox to this day.
That Karl Malone show was something else. Remember, we'd come into the studio, and he'd be in there doing his show during the NBA strike, and he did it with Vic the Brick Jacobs. And Vic would say, Mel, did you see this story? And Karl Malone, he had the LA Times open in front of his face the whole show and said, hey, listen to this. Whoa, this is interesting. And he'd read stories out of the LA Times for an hour. There's some prep work, huh?
Oh, yeah. It was great. And do you remember the guy whose career took off because of that was Jimmy Kimmel, who was doing the mornings at K-Rock. And one of the bits he would do is he'd do this impersonation of Karl Malone. Of course, Jimmy Kimmel's going off the ledge these days, but back then he was on his way up, Dave, and he'd do this Karl Malone impersonation, and Karl, he had an interesting use of the English language. But the funniest part about that, you remember I remember we went in and met with Mike Thompson, and he's like, because we were doing noon to 3, and he's like, hey, we're going to put Karl Malone on from noon to 1. It's don't worry about it though, because he's only going to be on during the NBA work stoppage, and this thing's probably going to last a couple of weeks. It's a labor dispute. Don't worry about it. Karl's not going to do it more than a couple of weeks. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Dave, they missed half the NBA season.
That's right.
Because that work stoppage kept going on and on and on and on. And so Karl ended up doing it, and he didn't really want to do it after a couple of weeks. He thought he was only going to do it a couple of weeks and then go back and play for the Utah Jazz. And then he ended up going to his home. I think it was in Arkansas or something, or Louisiana. And he was doing it from his house down there. And then, as you said, Vic the Brick, who fully embraced. I mean, Vic was fully immersed in the John Stockton role. He called himself John Stockton, setting up Karl Malone. And that's the kind of stuff. I don't think they really do that anymore. And I'll give Mike Thompson credit. He put on Karl Malone, who was at the time, you remember, the most hated guy, because the Lakers, before they started dominating, they couldn't get by the Utah.
They just gotten swept.
Yeah, they couldn't get by the Utah Jazz. Yep. Karl Malone and John Stockton. People romanticized the Kobe and Shaq years, but they struggled. The Utah Jazz were really good. They didn't win a championship, but they were obviously on 2 Hall of Fame players. And so Malone was hated. And they hired him. Also, remember Malone and then Mike hired Terry Bradshaw, as we talked about. Remember Karl Malone did a wrestling bit with Diamond
Dallas Page.
Yes, Diamond Dallas Page. Yeah, I remember that. That was interesting.
These names you're bringing up. You brought up Bo Bennett, our first program director. I think you were in the office with me at the time, Ben, and we had a 9 to noon slot open, and Jim Rome wasn't on in L.A. at the time. And we were saying, man, you got to. This is it. He's starting to get hot. He's the big deal here. You got to put Rome on between 9 and noon. Remember what he said? He said, "This is why you guys don't know shit about radio. You two know nothing." He said, "The fabulous sports babe is the future of this business." And he put her on instead of Rome. He said, "You guys don't know shit. Listen to me."
Well, and not only that, the greatest fabulous sports babe story of all time is they did put her on. No one listened. She had 0 ratings, right? It was a terrible, the show just didn't work in LA. I mean, she had success, but it didn't work in LA. And they had a big gala event. Do you remember this event at Dodger Stadium? They had all the sponsors, big advertisers. It was a big deal. All of us were out there from the station. And they flew in the fabulous sports babe. I think she did the show from Tampa or something like that. So they flew her out because she was on, as you said, 9 to noon. Well, unfortunately, though, I think it was Larry Stewart in the LA Times had reported this thing was on like a Friday night, if I remember correctly. But Larry Stewart in the LA Times, this is before the internet, so you got your news from the newspaper. Larry Stewart reported that the station was canceling the Fabulous Sports Babe show. You remember this, Dave?
Yeah, while she was on her way out.
She showed up and she read it and she heard about it.
Oh,
and
yes.
She went freaking nuts. As I remember, as I recall, at this event with all these sponsors, she was furious. And listen, rightfully so. I mean, I would be pissed too if they flew me out for an event and then they're going to get rid of the show. But it was craziness. Some of the stuff that happened. Do you remember the Jeff Witcher tapes? Do you remember the Jeff Witcher tapes that we had on the Ben and Dave show, Dave? You remember those?
I remember when we went to Vero Beach, we got a late flight in, and we walked into the house, and Witcher was sitting there in the living room watching TV. He was our roommate. What were the tapes? Yeah,
I remember that. But Jeff would do the Dodger, like the Vassay job. And Jeff, old school. Right, you'd agree. Jeff Witcher, probably 1970s, 80s
guy.
type.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, Ron Burgundy type, stuck in that era. And Jeff, wonderful person, very nice to me as I put all these qualifiers in. But he would send his report, his Dodger pregame stuff, down the ISDN line to Los Angeles. And he, in the time between recordings, you remember he started singing. You remember this, Dave?
Yeah, I do.
He started singing, and we recorded it, and we started playing it on the air, and he got so upset that we were playing this. But he was just like, he would sing like it was like an opera. And it was like the Dodger victory song or something like that. I forget what we called it, but something along those lines. We played that. I also remember with Vassay, you remember the David Vassay update that he gave from the Dodger Stadium?
Oh, God, that was a classic. Oh, my God.
Yeah. The Dodger game had gotten rained out. It was like the first rain out at Dodger Stadium in 20 years or whatever. And so they had him on to do the update, and poor David completely butchered the entire thing, right? It was
and he started breaking out laughing in the middle of the updates.
Oh, my God, it was so bad. And we saved that, and do you remember?
He hated that when we played it on the air?
Oh, he couldn't say it. But you remember, I think somebody broke into the locker. Remember we had that stuff on card?
He broke into your locker.
Yeah, they broke into the locker and took the stuff.
David Vassay broke into your locker and took it because you kept playing it on the air, and you were pissed. You said, "Stay out of my locker."
Oh yeah, you can't. I didn't know. He got the master keys for those little dopey lockers, and I was like, "What are you doing, dude? You're not supposed to do that. What's wrong with you? Shame on you." I mean, my God. And that stuff was next level, man.
Now that shows you how far he's come. He's so good now in Paulus on those Dodger broadcasts compared to those days. So I'm proud of the kid.
Oh no, listen, Vassay's great. I bust his balls. He busts my balls because he's on. I'm on at night. I do the network show, and he's on before me, so I don't really hear him. But occasionally I'll hear him on the way in, and I'll bust his chops for being a Dodger lapdog. And sucking up to the Dodger players and all that stuff. But he's very smooth. I mean, compared to what he was,
my God,
he's really good.
I remember another time I took that story about you were complaining about talking to drunks all night, and you should have become a lawyer like your brother. And then another time I'm listening to you on the air, and you were just ripping Tom Looney, our buddy Tom Looney. And you said, Looney, he gave me a tip on a house in a neighborhood, and he talked me into buying it, and I took a bath. This idiot Tom Looney is costing me a fortune.
Oh, yeah. No, I love Looney. I've known Looney. I've known you longer than Looney. But remember when Looney got hired at AM 1150?
Yep.
He was writing, I guess you've had him on, but he was writing that column, which was like a radio column on the internet.
LooneyNews.com.
Yeah. Okay, so he was writing a column about radio, and everyone was afraid of Looney, because Looney had the power of this column, and all that stuff. But I befriended Tom Looney. I'm still friends with Looney. We had a TV show. We had a TV show last couple of years, and so we did a radio show at Fox. You worked with Looney for a while. I did a show at Fox Sports Radio for like 8 years. Every Sunday we did an NFL show. So I love Looney. But I had saved up. I'm a very cheap man, Dave Smith, and I had saved up all that Ben and Dave money. We were making Kiss FM money at AM 1150.
Oh, those were the days.
I was saving up all that money, and I was living at home, and I did have an apartment. I lived in Park La Brea in Mid-City, Park La Brea, Mid-Wilshire. Had a couple of apartments. I lived there for like 10, 11, 12 years, and I was debating whether or not to buy a house, and I was like, I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm reading some stuff in the newspaper at the time about how the housing market's going to crash. And I remember having a conversation with Tom Looney, and he said, Ben, you just got to do it. He says, don't believe all those doom and gloom people. They always say the worst thing's going to happen. And I was like, I don't know about this, Tom. And he kept, every time I'd run into him, he said, oh, no, you got to do this, man. You got to just buy the house. You'll regret it if you don't. So I put the paperwork in. I bought the house in I think it was early 2008. And right before the housing market shit the bed. That's it. And bought a place in Lincoln Heights. Not a great neighborhood.
No.
Not a great, I mean, it's a nice building, but it was, not a great neighborhood, and right near Dodger Stadium. So, I was single. I no wife, no girlfriend, nothing. So I was like, I'll just go to Dodger games all the time. That neighborhood, Dave, living in Lincoln Heights I was from Orange County. It was an eye-opening experience, Dave. I was on a date with a girl. At the end of the date, there were all these people running from a street, the next street over. And I was like, I wonder what they're running from. And there'd been a rave, like a party, a warehouse party, and a bunch of people got shot. And that was the end of my. Yeah, the woman never called me back, Dave. I don't know why, but that was that. But I lived there for a few years. But yeah, I took a complete total bath on. I'm still all these. It's been 17 years or whatever it is, and I'm still feeling the effects of that poor decision I made all those years later. It's gone up a little bit, but not anywhere near where it should have gone.
Yeah, and of course, thanks to Tom Looney as well, right?
Oh, yeah, well, exactly. Well, listen, Tom Looney, and Tom's also recommended some people to hire that have been the worst possible people to hire. So I love Tom. He's a great character. You just don't want to take advice from Tom Looney. You don't want to take advice from Looney Tunes. For sure.
I'll have to remember that. But he's never recommended me for anything. What's the matter? We worked together. We had a show for 3 years together.
Oh, no, I'm talking about producers and board ops and people like that. Yeah, unless you want to be a board op or a producer, Dave. I don't think you want that. But yeah, the people behind the scenes. Because one thing about Looney, he loves like celebrity. He's all about celebrity and like
he's a star effort.
Oh, major star effort. Yes. And I'm pretty much the opposite of that. I'm like, I just want somebody that can do a good job. I don't care how big a name you are. I want someone that's competent, that will work hard and that kind of stuff.
I remember one time you and I were at a big fight in Vegas. We're sitting next to Rich Marotta. This is kind of another Ben and Dave story. We're sitting next to the great Rich Marotta. I had the over. It was a Klitschko fight. I had the over 6. So we're in the middle of the fight. The bell rings, it goes over 6. I won my bet, and I leaped up into the air, and I started running toward the sports book. And he said, where the hell are you going? And I said, I'm going to collect. He said, well, collect after the fight. And you're sitting right there with a stunned look on your face. And he said, you should be banned from all fights for the rest of your life for this. Stay here till it's over.
That's great. One of the other stories that I think you were with me on this, Dave, from the fights. I remember that we had a great time in Vegas at those fights. That was awesome. And you're much more, you knew everything about boxing. Like, I'm a pretty novice boxing fan. I knew the big fighters. You knew everybody in boxing.
That's my favorite sport. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you walk into a boxing event with Dave Smith and you knew like the trainers, the people behind the scenes, all that stuff. You remember I have a couple of boxing stories. Who's the trainer? Like Mike Tyson's, one of the guys that was with Tyson. Was it Kevin Rooney or something like
Kevin
that?
Rooney or Customato or Teddy Atlas? Teddy Atlas?
One of those. I think it was Rooney.
Probably
one
Kevin
of the guys
Rooney.
on. Yeah, we had Rooney on as a guest, and you asked him about something. I forget the specifics, but I remember he got very upset, and he started like kind of cursing and stuff. Remember that? I remember that. It was very awkward. I also remember my favorite boxing guest, Bert Sugar.
Oh, loved him.
I love Bert Sugar, and Bert Sugar, I think it was with you. A lot of these things have kind of mixed together over the years. But I was at a fight in Vegas. I think it was for the Ben and Dave show. We were doing the show, and it was at night, and Bert Sugar came down from his hotel room in his pajamas. He had the hat on and a cigar and a glass of alcohol. and he did the interview in his pajamas, and it was like the coolest thing in the. It was at the MGM Grand. It was at the MGM Grand. It was like the coolest thing. I was like, this guy. I could listen to Bert Sugar talk for hours.
I remember.
I wasn't even that big a boxing fan, but the story, he would tell stories about Babe Ruth running naked through a train, and just the most captivating storyteller of all time.
I remember I don't know if you were at the table with us or not. You might have been. I was there for a fight, and we're sitting at the Mandalay Bay Sportsbook drinking. It was me and Steve Kim and Doug Fisher and Bert Sugar and Al Bernstein, and all the boxing. You might have been there. I think we were doing the show together at the time. So we're sitting there, and we look over at the bar, and a guy walks over there, and he's ordering a drink, and he reaches into his back pocket for his wallet. And he pulls the wallet out, and a whole roll of bills fell onto the floor, and he didn't realize it. Like a whole bunch of money, a big pile. So right when Steve Kim, that's what we called him, the Korean cat. After that, he leaped to his feet and raced over there. And we said, wow, what a wonderful guy. What a high character guy. He's going to help that guy out. The guy dropped his money. He grabbed the money and he came back to the table and said, next round's on me, boys.
I do remember that moment. That was crazy.
And I said, boy, you are of the lowest character. You know that?
Well, he's gone on and done great things too, right? As a boxing guy, and
he's doing Whitlock show.
Yeah, he's done really good stuff, Steve. So he's done well.
He's on that Whitlock show almost every day, and then he was at ESPN for a while, and he was on the podcast here a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, so he's doing great stuff.
Yeah, it's always good. Like we had a lot of talent back in those days at AM 1150. We didn't realize it at the time, Dave. No. I don't think any of us realized that. We all were like, I remember we all thought we were going to get fired every day, right? We were like, oh, this isn't going to last, and it's kind of cool to look back almost 30 years later, and we've all got gigs, and we've, for the most part, we've done pretty well. You've done some great things, and you got the podcast, you got your own, radio stuff you're doing on the side as well. So everyone's doing well. Everyone's done pretty well for themselves.
I remember the first day I really met you, they called me up in the morning. And they said that, well, the show you're doing is no longer going to be on. So you need to come in and meet with the program director. I said, oh, God, I'm getting fired. I barely knew you at the time. I just seen you around doing updates. I said, oh, well, I guess this is it. They told me the show is canceled. So I drive all the way down there. I walk in. It was Bo Bennett's office. And I walk in. You're sitting there in a chair. And they said, here's your new partner. That's how we met.
Yeah. No, it was very awkward for me because you had done the show with Joey for a while.
Yeah.
I didn't know you. You guys had a cult following, and I'm like, the sports guys, and I'm like, oh man, people hated me. I was the young guy, I was the new guy, and all that stuff, and it worked out. But it was, at the beginning there, it's always when you start a show with someone new, there's a learning curve, and
well, you came through. Turned out to be a great show, in large part because of you. It turned out to be a great show.
No, we had a great time together. We had a lot of fun. I loved so many of those things. I still, as I've told you, I still reference a lot of that stuff to this day. A lot of the bits, like I do on the overnight show that I do, I still play some of the games, and we did some of that stuff on our show together. We tried different stuff, as I said in the previous podcast I've done with you. So it was a lot of fun.
I heard you doing Ben Mather Jeopardy about a year or so ago.
Yeah, we did.
That's what we used to do. We used to do that.
Yeah, I do Sports Jeopardy. I'll tell you a funny story about that. We actually got a cease and desist letter from the Jeopardy people.
Really?
Yeah. When I think it was Dan Patrick, I don't remember. Somebody brought back Sports Jeopardy on television, and they sent a cease and desist letter. We couldn't use the name Sports Jeopardy, so we changed it to Balderdash, and then we called it Benny's Balderdash or something like that. Then we switched back to Sports Jeopardy. I've gotten a few cease and desist letters over years. I got a lot when I did my website. When I had my website, people love to send threatening messages through lawyers to me and whatnot. But I do have to run, Dave. But we will be. I'll come out.
I know you got to go.
We'll do this again, Dave. We'll hang out. It's great to catch up with you, and I love everyone that's listening here. The old fans of the Ben and Dave show. It was a wonderful time. And it was great because it can never be repeated, right? Because of the way the world is now with social media and all that stuff, you can never really repeat what had happened in those.
And you know what's funny? We talked about always having all this stuff prepared, and you never get to it when you over-prepared. I had a whole list of stuff about sports going on that we were going to talk about. All we did was reminisce. This was fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there's other time to talk about that other stuff.
Who wants to talk about sports? Come on.
Exactly. Sports is overrated. What are we doing?
Well, great stuff. Thanks for hanging in there for 3 parts, Ben, and I appreciate this. And that's it for the Dave Smith Show here on Dave Smith Unleashed. And make sure to give us a subscribe and a follow and a like and a comment on YouTube. And we'll talk to you again next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed. Dave Smith Unleashed brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873.